back, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Yvonne Hollingsworth, and I'm going to be taking us home today. So this is the second half of presentation two, or session B, if you attended yesterday. And we have one final session tomorrow, session C, which will cover the DREAM Act application and AB 540. So let's go ahead and resume so that we can get everybody out on time for lunch. Alrighty, I'm going to turn off my camera and we will continue. And as you see at the bottom of the screen there, don't be shy about asking your questions. My entire team is standing by to answer your questions in real time, at least to the best of our ability. And if we can't answer your question, we will certainly research it so that we can get you an answer later. All right, thank you. Okay, so this section is, well, Adrian took us through the overview and the various processes that all of you are using when we administer Cal Grants. And so this is going to look at more of the actual WebGrants screens, and we'll go over some of the reports that you receive or can pull to help inform your jobs. So let's look at how to navigate within the WebGrants system. So this is our agenda for this session, the how to gain access to web grants and keep your access to web grants. We'll cover the student information screens. That's really helpful because a lot of schools will be hyper focused on the roster, and you might miss other good information that's on those student information screens. There are also screens specific to schools and all about the various things that schools can change within these menus. We'll go over that, your display roster, and then we'll finally end with some questions. Alrighty, so gaining access to WebGrants. Most of you probably already have WebGrants access. And if you don't, you can reach out to your WebGrants system administrator this individual who has expanded access to grant end users access to the system as well. That system administrator is also responsible for removing access as employees depart. So the authorized official is just somebody that's an authorized signer for your campus, and it might be your dean, and it might be somebody higher up that doesn't necessarily use WebGrants, but they are just signing off on the access request forms that you all submit to us. So here are the titles of the individuals that are going to be signing those WebGrants access request forms. But your system administrator is the person that you're going to reach out to if you are a traditional end user, so that they can grant you that access. And you can see here that high schools can have up to 2 essays, colleges can, and districts can have up to, or excuse me, high schools and colleges can have 2 individuals who are designated as SAs or system admins, and then our county users can have up to 5. Now, everybody else who is not an authorized official or a system admin is just a regular end user. So those individuals are going to reach out to the system admin to get their access renewed every year, or to get initial access if you're new to that district. This is what the access request form looks like. And so again, all the individuals who are supposed to be signing on that, it's pretty obvious, right? Pretty self-explanatory. And you can tell us whether it's a new or a renewal request. And then for those campus system administrators that are on the line with us, please know that if you are granting access to standard end users, you're going to keep those WebGrants access request forms on campus. Keep them on site. We don't collect those. The only ones that CSAC collects are the ones from the system administrators. So that's all we needed to say about the WebGrants access. If you don't have it, reach out to your system admin to get it. And then let's look at the student information screens. Just a quick caveat that all of the student data that you see in here is falsified. We make it up so that they look realistic, but they are made up social security numbers, made up names, dates of birth, all of that. And so this is your student information menu. You should have access to these 7 different screens. And again, if you don't have access to all of them and need access, reach out to your campus system administrator so they can grant you additional access. I would encourage all of you to play around and become familiar with these screens. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of financial aid folks get really hyper focused on the roster, and that doesn't always paint the full picture about what has transpired with your student's award, especially if there is some troubleshooting to do. Like, why was a student on my roster last week and they're no longer on my roster? So when you look through some of these other screens, you can paint a better picture of what has actually happened with that student's record. Now I'll take you through the first screen, the award summary. This is the one you're probably going to refer to the most because it shows you all kinds of information, not only the school codes where the student has indicated that they are attending or the colleges themselves have claimed students onto their rosters by doing a school change upload. So that's how you see this information here. And then these what this stands for is edits. I forget what the P stands for. These various edits. When a student is not awarded a Cal Grant, you'll see this numeric code and an information icon letting you know why. Why didn't they get an award? In this case, no GPA or test scores were submitted. So as we all know, a Cal Grant application is a FAFSA or a DREAM Act application plus a matched GPA. So this student was missing their GPA in these first few years, but look, they figured it out. They realized later on at some point they had to get a GPA to us because they've been awarded later. You can also see these award statuses, right? You can see the student was financially eligible for the Cal Grant B, and the student happens to also be a student with dependents. So financially eligible for that award the year prior in 23-24, that student was considered for both the Cal Grant B and the Cal Grant A. They were auto accepted for the B. And if you were in attendance yesterday, you might know that this probably means that student was at a CSU. And I know from the school code that that's a CSU. And so when a student is dually eligible for Cal Grant A and B, it's the college segment that determines which of those 2 awards they would get. In this case, CSUs default to Cal Grant B because that's going to be more financially beneficial to the student. So you can see though that we did at least consider the student for the Cal Grant A, but because that B was a better option for the student, then it shows that the Cal Grant A was withdrawn by the commission. So I hope that is helpful to you. Lots of good information again on these screens. Also, this far right column shows you CC reserve for the community colleges on our line. You probably are aware that that means that a student was awarded likely a Cal Grant A at the community college, but is not able to actually utilize that or receive a disbursement at the community college because in most cases, Cal Grant A is specific to our universities, right? And so if this were a student with a Cal Grant A at a community college, it would indicate a Y here. A yes for that award would have been placed on a community college reserve. Now the award detail screen is probably the second most used screen, because this also shows other information that the first one we just looked at, the award summary, does not. Specifically, this is how you're going to see the scores for our competitive awardees. So if you're wondering why a student may not have gotten a competitive Cal Grant, you could come here and you can see what their score was, and then you can see what the cutoff was. So you can see here that I believe it's 895 in this example was the cutoff for this competitive award. And so if the student had fewer than those points, they would not have gotten a competitive award. The student payment history, as that name suggests, shows us each term of each year whether or not the student was paid and how much eligibility was used. So we can see that the student was paid for fall term in the 2023 school year for the tuition and fees component of that Cal Grant B. Up here we see it's a Cal Grant B. And then we see that the access portion of that award was also paid out. And so the student used 37.5% eligibility. That tells me that they were probably 3/4 time enrolled. And up here, lots of other good information, right? Letting us know how much remaining leave of absence that student has available to them. And so if you didn't already know, every student that gets a Cal Grant can place that Cal Grant on a hold or a leave of absence for up to 2 years. And so we express the years of Cal Grant eligibility in terms of percentage, right? So 200% would be equivalent to 2 years. So that tells me that this student has not tapped into their leave of absence yet because they have the full 200% or 2 years of remaining eligibility, leave of absence eligibility. There's also a separate category for students who are enrolled less than half time. They can do that for 1 year, meaning they've got an award, but they're really not utilizing it because they're going to school for so few units that they're even less than half time. And as we know, whether it's a federal award or a state Cal Grant, students have to be enrolled at least half time to receive a payment. So students also have a less than half time balance, 1 year or 100% for every student. And this also shows us the remaining eligibility. So every year as a student exhausts this eligibility and dips down, this number will change. And so when the student goes, renews their award for the new school year, this dollar amount, or excuse me, remaining eligibility amount will look different than it did the prior year. Let's now look at your school information screens within WebGrants. So there are 5 of these screens here. The demographics, contact information, cost estimate, super important to get that in every year. Once CSAC announces that that screen is open to update your cost of attendance information and transaction statuses, and then the search screen. One more note about the cost estimate. So this is what schools send us every year, typically in October. I believe this past year it was due in January. We extended the deadline, but that is what schools send to us when your rates change. This is really important to keep updated because keep in mind that we program your school's cost of attendance into our system so that we can calculate unmet need, right? That's part of that student's Cal Grant eligibility calculation. The unmet need is a piece of that. And the unmet need calculation is that student aid index minus, or excuse me, the cost of attendance at your campus minus the student aid index. That leaves us with the unmet need. So if this number is skewed because it's old, and I'm saying this because this happens. I have looked at schools whose cost estimate forms are 10 years in arrears. And so that's not going to benefit our students. So it's super important that we get that in every year. All right, so the first screen that we're looking at is the institution demographics. As the name suggests, this is all the demographic information about your campus, the address, the city, all that good stuff. So your WebGrants system administrator can update that if your, say, school undergoes a name change or moves, or you have a separate campus that needs to be added. So the WebGrants system admins can do that. And then the contact information, this is also really important because when CSAC needs to reach out to your campus, to any of the individuals on campus, whether it's the WebGrants system administrator, your Cal Grant coordinator, middle class scholarship coordinator, Chafee person, all of those titles, right? We are going to refer to this list. And if this is outdated, we're not going to be able to reach you. So super important that the WebGrants system admin, or anybody really, I believe everybody can have access to this screen. updates this as these roles change or the information changes, especially that email and phone number. You can also edit right here, delete the entry completely, and look at the changes over time, the history of the changes. Here is that cost estimate that I talked about, right? So typically this is due in October of every year. We send announcements saying, hey, schools, we're getting ready to have the cost estimate functionality live in WebGrants. Be sure to get your cost estimates in by whatever the deadline is. Again, typically October. And so you want to make sure that you're updating this not only with your cost of attendance information, but it asks other details as well, like what your default housing preference is for your first year freshman, second year, and so on and so forth. And these changes on this form came about because the FAFSA removed a lot of the questions that informed us about those choices. So now you can capture that on all those cost estimate forms. So let's move into your actual roster. This is where all the action happens, right? And on that roster, if you didn't pay close attention before, you'll notice now that all of these indicators are listed on that. They're headers across the top of your roster that tell us what the remaining eligibility is, what that student's SAI is, etc. This is what that looks like. So if you didn't look at this before, now you can really see all this rich information that you have access to. New or renewal student, dependent or independent. What is that student's housing code? On campus, off campus, or with parents? And we just looked at that cost estimate form that tells us what your campus preference is for the housing for your various students. So a lot of good information here. And this is also the way that we're going to customize our rosters. You can customize your rosters, and we'll look at that in a few slides, to hone in on these specific headers, right? If you want to just look at your students who were foster youth because you want to do some campus outreach, you can filter your rosters to only pull up your foster students or your DREAM Act applicants. So you have a lot of ways to hone in on a specific cohort of students. And so the timing of the rosters is also announced through our listserv. So I encourage everybody, if you've not done so already, to register for our listserv so that you can receive all of these announcements and deadline reminders. So just as an example, you can see that every November, more or less, we're going to open up those rosters for your E1 students, right? Because typically, this has been an unusual couple of years, but typically those financial aid applications open up on October 1st, right? And so if we have students applying on October 1st, they could receive a notification. High school entitlements students specifically, they could receive a notification of their Cal Grant award as early as November. We know, though, that the FAFSA is going to be pushed back until December 1, and as a result, the DREAM Act application will also mirror the launch date for FAFSA, or pretty closely. We'll launch it about the same time as FAFSA. So you can see throughout the school year and the different award cycles when we open up the rosters. And again, we always announce that when we're getting ready to open up or once they are opened up. So the next steps would be, once you know when your rosters are open, we want to identify your Cal Grant awardees, right? Not every student is going to list your campus on their financial aid application like they should. And so there are other ways that you as a campus can identify who on your campus has actually been awarded, even if they didn't list your college on their financial aid application. Then verifying their eligibility so that we can prepare to pay them, collecting any verification documents as needed, right? There are certain verifications, federal verifications that are required, V1 standard verifications. There's the AB 840 verification for our transfer entitlement students. Sometimes you might have to verify the high school graduation if the student didn't self-certify through the WebGrants for Students portal, in which case you as the college could verify high school graduation using that student's transcript from high school. So you may have a need to reach out to your students and collect those documents. And then we do want to go ahead and clear all those holds and flags so that we can disperse those payments to our students. Now, here's a tool that you may or may not be aware of, but it can be helpful to you. And so the goal here is to introduce you to some various reports or tools that you may not have been familiar with and you might want to play with. And that's always what I encourage. The best way to learn is just to get in there and get your hands dirty, play with these various screens and tools. And in most cases, you don't need to be afraid of breaking anything or ruining anything. Just practice as best you can so that you can find out which of these tools, which reports, which screens work best for you. So the award status extract allows schools to determine which of the students who are going to be attending their campus was actually awarded a Cal Grant. So this will result when you format and upload a file to identify those students, we will kick back a report, a feedback report, separated into actually it's two separate reports. A list of awarded students and those who are not awarded. And that's how you know which of those students got a Cal Grant, right? And so once you know that, then you can report a school change, and that will bring those students onto your roster. So if that doesn't make sense, we will have a couple more screenshots, I think later on in this presentation. So just another reminder, right? We did send out the PDF of these two presentations today to all attendees who were registered before yesterday. If you didn't get it, check those spam and junk boxes. And if you still don't see it, as we mentioned earlier, we do get a lot of kicked back emails, bounce backs. And so that could mean that your agency or organization has a firewall system that is blocking our emails. So check that as well, or add us as a trusted contact so that it will allow us to send those emails to you. All right, so moving on